Thank you all for coming this morning. I'm really happy to see so many of you come here because as introduced, it's at 10 o'clock in the morning. I didn't expect that many people, but you're all here. Thank you. Great. I noticed that it's quite hot in the room. I'm not sure if you have the same feeling. If it's like too hot for you, there's an open door there. So just feel free to just get a breath of air. If there's any questions, just raise your hand, and I will decide at the moment whether it's opportune to answer it right now or postpone until after the talk. So here we are. Huey. My name is Roland Bouwman. I work for EPAM Systems as a chief software engineer. Huey and DuckDB is mostly a side project for me, but I'm always looking for new opportunities to use this in my work. I've worked at MySQL, I've worked at Pentaho and at Sun, and now I'm working as consultant and software engineer at EPAM Systems. And I work with data, a lot of databases, data warehouses, mostly in the business intelligence space. And I ran into DuckDB a couple of years ago, 1.5 years ago, I would say. And I decided to build, like in the Christmas holidays, a little app just to get started with that whole thing. I will talk about DuckDB a little bit after the slide, but first about Huey. What is this project? So Huey is a tool for data analysis and exploration. And it does this using a pivot table in your browser. And the app itself is a very lightweight, browser application, but you can just run it as a static page. You can just click the page, open it in your browser directly, so you don't need a server to run it. You can also run it inside a server, inside a website, but it just tries to be flexible like that so that you can run it in any of those places. And Huey tries to use, like for me it's a pet project to really discover and learn about DuckDB and mostly about the DuckDB WebAssembly interface. For those of you that don't know what it is, WebAssembly is basically an interface that allows you to run binary code in your browser in a sandboxed environment. And the developers of DuckDB made their product available as a WebAssembly library, so that you can easily incorporate it in your browser, in your web application. So, anybody here using DuckDB? Yeah. So there's one. Okay. That's if you're not, that's okay. We're going to talk about DuckDB a little bit first because that's what this whole thing is about. Huey itself is just a pet project. I think it's useful in itself, but it's mostly about DuckDB. So if you see anything inside Huey that you think is great, it's probably because of DuckDB. If you see anything that's not so great, it's probably because of me. So DuckDB, what is that? DuckDB is it's a database management system, but it's a special kind because it's in process. Anybody of you using SQLite? Okay, everybody knows SQLite. So DuckDB is like SQLite. I mean, from a perspective of the user, it's like SQLite, except that it's really great at analytical queries, OLAP. So SQLite is great for all kinds of storage and transactional things, but DuckDB is exactly like that, but for OLAP. And of course, as you know, SQLite is not great at multi-user usage, or it's not designed for that. DuckDB is the same thing. So what is the great features of DuckDB? Just like SQLite, it's very simple. It's just, you just download it, you unzip it, and you get going. That's all it is. So no installation and so on. And this is great for me personally as a consultant because I work in environments for corporate customers, which give me like lockdown laptops where I can do nothing, I can install nothing, but DuckDB I can run there. So that's really great. It has no external dependencies. So you just, it's just unwrap and get going. It's really fast because it uses a columnar engine for processing data, and it uses all the power of your local system. So all the cores that you have in your machine, it will try to use them, utilize them in parallel, and the whole interface of the system is built in a streaming way, so that they try never to run out of memory by making clever use of a interface. And so this means that you can process datasets that are larger than your main memory. There are some cases where DuckDB will still run out of memory, but it's really, it does all it can and it's pretty good at it. Portability. It runs on Windows, Mac OS, and all popular hardware architectures. And there's drivers and connectors for all major languages, so it's quite easy to run it inside your software. Python is a very popular environment for running it in, but there's also great support for Java, for Go, for Node.js, and so on. It's also for WebAssembly, which is what we're going to talk about later. It has a really nice SQL dialect. The SQL dialect that you write in DuckDB is mostly standard SQL with lots of modern, support for modern features. Lots of features that favor OLAP and analytics. And it includes a couple of extensions to the SQL language, which make it really easy for interactive use. So for data exploration. So the original design goal of SQL, allowing business users to use English and so on, it really actually makes good on that promise by making it very easy by adding some extensions to the SQL language, which just make it easier to use. So you don't have to type as much. You don't have to write your statements completely in full, and it's really clever like that. It has a very rich type system. So some databases have like these object relational extensions that allow you to use JSON or use document type of things. DuckDB has all that too, but it excels in how it integrates that with the whole function library and the whole SQL dialect. So it really makes it natural to use those kinds of data types, which I think is quite unique. Then, of course, DuckDB is open source under MIT license, so it's very permissive, and you can use it. Can do almost anything with it, it's free, so that helps a lot. Okay, that's about DuckDB. Now about Huey itself. So what do we do with Huey? Huey is basically we open the web app, we navigate to the Huey URL. You can open then data files. And that's one of those things that DuckDB also does really good. You can directly query data sets from file. And it supports CSV, it supports Parquet and JSON. And it does this all in a very straightforward manner. So, there's other databases, of course, that allow you to read CSV. DuckDB just kind of intelligently figures out what the limits are and how to parse it. With almost no hassle at all. So in Huey, we open a couple of data files, and then we choose to analyze one, and it allows you then to inspect the attributes. So what it does is, it looks inside the file, finds the columns that are inside, and then presents them in a way that makes it easy to analyze them. You then place the attributes on the query axis of your pivot table interface, and you apply some subtotals if you like. And then you get the results, and you can bookmark your query or export it for later use. So let's take a look at it. So I'm just going to go over to my browser, and I just loaded it from my development environment. So it's just a file access. It loads pretty quickly. I can show you, like, if I just enter it again. So this is what it takes to load it, really quick. And the only external dependencies for this web app is the DuckDB library, which we get from the internet, and some icons. So the first time you load, you need to be connected to the internet, but then your browser cache just caches all that stuff, and you can just keep using the app offline if you want to. Or you can also go to put this whole app in a website and go from there. And that's exactly what, this is the GitHub project page for it. And there's a link in there that links to Huey online. So you can try it out without installing anything or, even checking out the repository. Just go to that link and find it. Now, how to use it? So we get this big button over here, and we can use it to open files. I got a bunch of files over here, so let's start with something simple, just CSV. I've got a, let me check that, order lines. So this is the upload interface. I just checked now one file. We're going to load a couple of files simultaneously later on. And we get a little report that it succeeded in loading it, and now we can analyze it. So we just do that. And this is this attribute interface I talked about. So we basically see all the columns that appear in our file. We get a little icon that tells us about what kind of data type it is. And here we have the buttons to place these attributes on the axis. And these are the axes. So we have filters, columns, rows, and cells. First start with something simple. So we say, let's say, the order identifier, and we put those on the rows. And we're going to say, okay, let's just count the number of orders. That comes on the cells. So if we would just execute this, so this is our result. So here we see just the individual orders and the number of items that are in it. So let's take a look at some other attributes. Let's say, for example, order type. We put those on the columns. I'm going to execute the query. I'm going to put auto on for a second so we can just interactively use it. So now we see inbound orders, outbound orders with the number of items in them. And now let's add some other stuff. Let's add, for example, the dates to it. So date is one of these columns. Of course, if we have just raw dates, it wouldn't be very useful, right? Because we have a lot of spread in the data, and we would just get a lot of data there. What you want to do is you want to navigate that data. Yes? Sorry. Oh, bigger, yes, of course. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, let me just get this a little bit. Okay. Well, yeah, the dates. I was talking about the dates. The dates is just a big spread of data with all these individual values, and it's not very useful by itself. It's much more useful to peel it down and to drill down and treat it as a hierarchy. So we can do that because Huey already extracts the individual date fields for you from your raw dates. So here we have for the date fields, we can say, okay, give us as an ISO date or as a local date, or we can get parts of the date, year, quarter, a month. So let's do that. Let's just, I'm going to get rid of this one, and we're going to say, okay, break it down by year, and then break it down by quarter, and then break it down by month name. And then, for example, let's put the day of the week on the other axis. So in this way, we can analyze the data in a very straightforward manner. And it's really quick. Now, this was a pretty small data set. This was just, I don't know, we can see. Yeah, so this was just 62K, so nothing. What becomes interesting really with Huey, and with DuckDB, I should say, is when we look at larger files. So nowadays, even though there's still a lot of CSV around, Parquet seems to be the kind of the industry standard for distributing data files, and also even for analyzing them. So I downloaded a bunch of Parquet files from the New York taxi trip data site, and this is a site which gives you, for each month of the year, all the taxi rides in all of New York. And these data files are, they're not huge, but they're half a gig, right? So it's a nice amount of data. And, let's just open one. So you see the load is pretty quick. Huh? It's all really quickly to open that file. if we start analyzing it, let's just first say how many rows are in there. And we see, okay, that's 80 million rows in just this one file. Yes?
Yeah, there's one thing. So how is about exactly this data discovery? So if you throw pandas, you get, the first thing you get is like rows, cells, a bit of data. So you know the data. So if I don't know the data and I want to get a glimpse of it, it's very important to have a first overview. Is that somehow possible built into it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of new features coming here where we have the data source capabilities. And then we get the columns, and we're gonna, this is all work in progress, but there's gonna be a data preview in there. And what you can already do with just the normal interface is, okay, so of course you don't know the data, but you can read the column names. It gives you some clue of what is there. If you want to know about what type of values are in there, because that's probably what you're interested in, then what you can do is, so typical OLAP tools have a very specific idea about what is attributes and what is measures, and you cannot really mix that, right? And Huey doesn't care. Any attribute, it guesses what probably are measures, but the ones that are, presented as attributes, you can still switch and still present them as attributes as well. So let's do that. So let's say, for example, we have the license numbers. We don't know what values are in there. So what we can do is we can say, okay, give us a histogram. And okay, we have to scroll a little bit, but in this way we can get an overview of what's inside those things. And I'm not sure what other things like you would like to see, but maybe we can talk a little bit about that later on, so we can. So right now, if you want to know what values are in there, you just drag them in the axis and you will see it. That's basically what you will get. Okay, so 80 million rows. So let's do some interesting things with it. Let's break it down again by time. So we're going to say, okay, let's get, for example, the year. And I'm just going to put this one out. We're going to add the quarter, going to add the month name and the day of the week on there. And we're going to say, do something like driver pay. So driver pay is clearly a measure, right? It's something that you want to see in the cells and that you want to aggregate on. So here we can choose all the different kinds of aggregators. By default, we can choose some. That's also here in the default ones. But all the other statistics are here. So let's say we want to see the average for that. And for example, for the trip, we're going to say, give us the sum. Oh, wait, that's tips, sorry. Sorry, trip miles, I'm sorry. That was the one. Okay, so like this. So now we can just run that. And it's going to take a little while. I mean, it has to do some work. But, it's in the browser and it's 18 million rows. So I think it's a pretty good result for what you can do in a web app nowadays. Now, Huey is built in such a way that we only, it will only query the data that you see on the screen. So it will not, do the entire result set. So that means if we start scrolling, it will retrieve the bit that you haven't scrolled towards, and you will see that. Now, if you see, okay, this is a nice report, I'm happy with this, then you can download it. And here you have some options. You can say, okay, I want to have it as a pivot table, or I want to have it as a normal table. I want to put it in the clipboard, or I want to put it in to a file. And we can choose like, okay, do we want CSV or do we want, parquet or as SQL statement? You can get it as well. So all these things we can do. Let's just now get it to the clipboard. Just do export. And now if we go to a file, we can just get the data out and you can deal with it. Yes?
The default delimiters, are they from the input file or are they configurable?
It's a good question. This is all, sorry? Yeah, the question is the delimiters for the export, where are they coming from? So you can obviously just enter them right here. And we also have a settings dialog where you can enter your defaults and formats and all those kinds of things. So, and for the import, it's different, because in the import we just let DuckDB detect it, and then you can still override it if you want to, but that applies only to the CSV files. So, okay. Okay, I promised that. So we've seen 18 million rows. It's nice. Oh yeah, another thing I wanted to share. So we just exported the data, and that's nice. But what if you wanted to share, your report itself with a colleague, right? Well, you can do this as well, because every time you change the query, you'll see that the hash changes, and we can even, use the browser buttons. Well, wait, sorry. Okay, this was a mistake. Yeah, let me see why that actually happens. Let's see if we can get it to work. So, but the point is, every time you change your query, you do something with the access, it will update the hash in the top, and you can bookmark this and send it an email, and then your colleague will open it, and then of course what will happen is, if they navigate there, so I navigate now directly to the hash itself, and it detects that there's a file that needs to be loaded, and of course we cannot send the file inside that thing, right? That would be insane. It's too much data. So it presumes that your colleague also has access to this same data set, which could be solved with a shared network drive or with something like that. And then it will offer you to browse it. So we can do that, and we can then open it. And okay, it restores your query. That's the point. So in this way, you can save your reports and share them with your colleagues. Okay. Okay, so 18 million rows. I promised more, so let's do that again. What we can do is we can, open files, and now instead of opening one file, I'm just going to add a couple of files. So we had trip data 1, so let's just add 2 and 3. So, and this, of course, these files have all the same makeup, because the website that, I get them from, delivers the files in this format, right? So it's meant to be all the same, except each is a partition for each month. Now, you can see we can open multiple files simultaneously, and when we open more files, Huey detects what the column signature is, and if it notices that there's, multiple datasets with the same column signature, it exposes each of them separately, but it also exposes them as a bucket with all of them, so we can analyze them all together. So let's do that. So we're going to have the same query, and now, of course, we have more data. So now we have 56 million rows. We can add more. So we can say, okay, let's also add a next quarter. Okay. And there we go. We get 150 million rows. And the rest still works the same. We can still add attributes. Obviously, at some point, it's gonna have to put the work in, so it's gonna be a little bit slower. But I think the big takeaway is that this is just on top of files, right? So there's no, I mean, if you want to give this to a user, all they need to do is just open the file. There's no modeling involved or whatever. You can just start analyzing immediately. And if you want to do fancy stuff and you really want to prepare your data set and really make it usable for OLAP usage, and add friendly names and that kind of things, well, you can do that too. We're going to work on some features to actually make that possible inside Huey. But what you can also do is, prepare your data set, put it in the DuckDB database file, because, like I said, we're using DuckDB mostly just for data processing, but you can also use it to store your data and actually distribute it, and use it as a way to distribute data marts. So what I did is a couple of these trip data files, I put them in a separate DuckDB database file. We can open that too. And then you can see it, it detects its database and it detects the different schemas inside and then the different tables inside. And here we have for 4 of those files, one view. So we can start analyzing that one. So in this way we can actually control, so now it's still very raw, right? Because I didn't bother to actually rename the columns and actually make fancy calculations on top of them or whatever. But the point is you have this freedom to present your data in a data mart and use that as the input for Huey. And it's a little bit faster as well, actually. It's like, it's not you shouldn't expect magic, but it's a little bit faster than going directly on raw parquet files. So yeah, there we go. I'm kind of, this is like what I wanted to show about Huey itself, and now I'm going to resume the presentation, talk a little bit about how it's made. Any questions so far, or something that's, yes? Sorry, go ahead.
You told it's possible to open JSON files.
It is, yes.
But JSON file can manage also data that are not tables.
Yes.
How
Yes,
works here?
good question. So the question is, Huey also supports JSON files, and how does that work? Because JSON files can have structure and can have, complicated objects, right? And how does that work? That's the question, right?
That are not presentable as a table.
Yeah, not presentable as a table. So, to answer that question, what I do now is I do a very simple, trick. I let DuckDB handle it, and DuckDB has just like it has for CSV. It has auto discovery options. It also has that for JSON. And I played a little bit with that. I have to say that the JSON discovery is a little bit less advanced than what is available for CSV, but there's a couple of options. So first of all, out of the box, DuckDB supports reading JSON as an object, like one big object with everything inside, or as an array of objects, or as JSON-L format, so individual lines of JSON objects. And we can do that in Huey as well. I have a simple JSON file present here, donuts, I believe. Let me check that. So right now, what I do is this is actually the structure of that. And you're right. It does not directly give this as a nice table, but there's a few fields in there. So basically, what happens is, if I load it, yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, I should have actually zoomed in on that a little bit. When you load a JSON file, the JSON support is not entirely out of the box. It needs an extension. So DuckDB has a lot of extensions available. JSON extension is one of them. And when you load a file in Huey, we detect whether some extension needs to be loaded. We load it dynamically, and then we go ahead with that. Anyway, we have now this donuts file over here. If we analyze it, you see that, okay, it has detected that we have a couple of scalar attributes that we can immediately report upon, because of the structure of that file is like that, right? And then there's a couple of structured objects in there, and those right now won't really work. We won't really be able to do anything with those. But what I envision, and what I would have liked the JSON reader of DuckDB to do, is to be able, for each column, to specify a JSON path that lets you extract exactly what you need, right? That is what I would like to do. So we're working on that, but it's not there right now. So that's the question. There was another question.
Is it possible to search full text over all columns?
The question is it possible to search full text over all columns? In DuckDB you can, in Huey you cannot. But if you, how would you see such a feature for such an analysis?
So we often analyze Windows event logs, and if I search for a username, it could be in different columns.
Okay, yeah.
And I want to have
Yeah, exactly. So what you want to do is you want to create a filter, basically, to say, okay, okay. That's an interesting feature, and right now that's not there, but maybe we can. Well, let me put it this way. So like I said, this is my pet project, but I'm using it to learn more about DuckDB, to learn more what I can do with DuckDB. DuckDB supports full text indexes and supports full text searching. So there's no technical reason why such a feature could not be built. However, this is all my own work. So I need people to actually go make issues and actually use it. And if something sucks, let me know. And the best way to do that is to go to the GitHub project. So it's github.com rpbouwman/Huey, and file issues there. And yeah, the more detail you put in there, the better it becomes for me to build it. Or if you want to build it yourself, that's also possible, because just like DuckDB, this is an MIT project, so you can do whatever with it. So let's, but together is better. So if you wanna have a feature, please participate. That makes it better for everybody. Okay. Any more questions about Huey itself right now? Because otherwise, yeah, okay.
One question. So as soon as we start to use it like in cooperation for,
yes,
then accessibility becomes a topic.
yeah.
Is there any work done here?
Accessibility. So what I did is, this is an interesting question, because I wanted Huey to be very simple as an app to build. So there's no external dependencies except for Huey, for the DuckDB and the icons. And there's no frameworks involved. It's all plain HTML. And I'm using, because that was another challenge for me to figure out, okay, so we have a whole history of JavaScript frameworks and language, polyfills and whatever. And nowadays, yeah, you could really say, I mean, there's so much in the browser already, and so much standardization done, and so much, great work on semantic HTML. Do we really need that? So I want to try and put that to the test. So what I did is, I use mostly semantic, HTML tags to represent the UI. And whenever it's not possible to do that directly with a tag, I use ARIA roles throughout the whole thing. And the whole layout and the whole styling of it is all done declaratively with CSS4 nowadays, because we have that. And even the screen logic, so like disabling this or that component based upon some setting, is all done declaratively in CSS. And there's like a very minimal amount of actual active JavaScript code to manage the state of the UI. It's almost everything is done declaratively. And almost all the code in there has to do with just managing mostly the pivot table, because that is something that I cannot do with just declarative HTML. But so it's an interesting question, and for me the accessibility, like the focus on accessibility is new in the sense that I never cared about it myself. I always let some framework take care of it, and I do run some benchmarks now and then. I think, from what I can tell, is good, but technically good. I don't have experience with screen readers or those, so for me it's hard to actually test that. But again, I would really, if you're interested in that, really encourage you to try it. And if you find any flaws in how I'm handling it, I would be very interested to know, because it really has been. So I try to use the accessibility not as an afterthought from, oh, this is something I need to do, but I really try to use it as a semantic layer to actually get stuff done. And I have to say that I was really pleasantly surprised to see how many elements are defined in that space, and how it actually made it easier to build this. So I think it's a good question. Thank you. Okay. Okay, let's go a little bit on how it's built. So let me see. Yeah, okay, so we also touched a couple of these things before. So static web page, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, a lot of CSS. Right now, I would also say that the initial draft of Huey is meant to be like a super extensible thing. It's just like, for me, was really a quick and dirty app to just get started with it. Now, afterwards, now that I'm taking it forward, because I've been working on it for about 6 months, but like a lot of, during the Christmas holidays and then very few afterwards, and now upcoming to this talk a little bit more again. So I'm now kind of refactoring it a little bit to make it a little bit easier to reuse the components that I built. Let's talk about using DuckDB WebAssembly, because even if you don't like Huey, I think it's still, can still have a few takeaways from DuckDB WASM to build your own, analytical web application. So how does that work? The DuckDB documentation is quite good. So I started there, and it got me quite far. But I brought it down to you for you a little bit. So what we do is in order to use DuckDB WebAssembly in your web application, you just type this script, and it has to be a module because that's the way it's distributed. Import DuckDB WebAssembly module from a CDN. At least that's what I do. You can also get these resources down yourself and distribute them inside your application. I might want to do that at some point, but right now I'm just taking it from the CDN, and that seems to work quite nicely, especially because it gets cached by the browser. So you can just, once it's downloaded, you can use your app offline. So that's actually a great feature of that. This is just some boilerplate. It needs to be there because the WebAssembly module makes a decision based on your browser which resources to grab. And that's what all this code is for. All interaction with DuckDB is through a worker, and it's all handled for you by the distribution itself. So once you've got the worker, you can instantiate the database. And this is a database process. So this is just one process that allows you to do DuckDB queries. You instantiate it. And then you can make a connection, and once you have the connection object, you can run queries. To make it easy for myself, I hoist all these useful variables into the window so that I have them available in my application. I know many purists will frown upon that, but it's liberating. It's really it helps to have these things around all the time. And for the Huey app, I think it's suitable as well, because we just need one instance of the DuckDB process. There's no need to complicate things. So for me, this works great. So to be clear, the stuff on top, everything from up to the connection instantiation, that's all boilerplate that comes out of the DuckDB website, and this is just a little part I added to make it easy for me to access it. Okay, the browser has limited access to your file system, right? Because it's a security issue. So in order for DuckDB to actually access files from your local system, you have to register them. So what happens is it allows you to do that using the Web API file interface. So you need to have a user action where the user explicitly selects a file, and then you can get the file handle, and then you can register it. And from that moment on, it becomes available to DuckDB. There's a whole lot of stuff going on behind the screens. Unfortunately, it's all being taken care of by the DuckDB WebAssembly library. So all you need to do is really, this is just a very crude bit of code that assumes you already have this file handle there, which you would get from like a web HTML input element with a file type. User selects the file, you get the file handle, and you just register it using this DuckDB function, register file handle. And from that moment on, that file is available inside DuckDB, and you can immediately start querying it. And DuckDB is made in such a way that you have the standard SQL syntax, select star from. Usually there will be a table in there, but DuckDB also allows you to directly plug the file name in there. So it's very easy, very, very simple to use. So that's really all you need to do. So this is a picture I took from the DuckDB WASM API documentation. And this explains this whole process of what it takes to actually expose a file from the local file system, to the browser process. The point of this picture is not so much to really show you how that works, but more that a lot of complicated things are being taken care of you by the library. That's really what this picture says. Okay, now that you have a file, you can run queries on it. And yeah, this is just a sample code to just illustrate the principle. It's not meant as actual code that you would run yourself, but this does show how it works. You take your connection. We covered creating a connection in the first slide, after the boilerplate, and you just call query, and you pass the SQL syntax in there, and you get a result set. And yeah, because the interaction with DuckDB is all through the worker, every call you make to it is asynchronous. So you either have to await the result, or you have to, explicitly write a promise syntax with then and so on. So then you have the result. And yeah, so here's the other example that you can use. You can do query and then use callbacks to actually pick it up. Now, once you have the result set, you have to do something with it. The interface that the DuckDB WebAssembly library uses to handle results and handle datasets in general is Arrow, Apache Arrow. So they use the TypeScript binding for Apache Arrow to actually hand the result to you. So that's what you get. You get an Arrow table, basically. And yeah, in my very clunky JavaScript syntax, this is just just again to illustrate how you would access the different calls, not necessarily the right way to do it in general, but you say result set.numRows gives you the number of rows that are available in that result set. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily materialized. You say result set.get, and it gives you that row. And this is basically an object that contains your fields. So if you want to get the metadata of the fields, you say result set.schema.fields. And this gives you, the things like the name and the data type, the arrow data type. And to get the value out, you say row, and you pass in the field name. And then this will give you an arrow object that represents your value. And from that moment on, it becomes a little bit tricky because, of course, your application is JavaScript, so you want to have JavaScript values in some way. And you get them delivered as arrow values. And this translation is not necessarily always straightforward. So there is a standard method that you can call get JSON on those things, which is a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't give you a JSON string, but it gives you a JavaScript object, basically. But then the DuckDB type system and the mapping from the DuckDB type system to the arrow type system, and then, yeah, then you, of course, need to map your arrow type system to whatever your application needs to do. And this, there's some things that are straightforward, but for example, handling dates is something that's not always so straightforward. Handling big ints is also sometimes tricky, and especially handling decimals is also something that takes some care. And yeah, that's really a lot of detail there that I don't care to discuss now because it goes very into the nitty-gritty. But if you have some questions about that, we can take that offline and talk about that. But in Huey, I do a lot of work to actually format the data that comes out of the queries and format it nicely. So, for example, especially in analysis, financial analysis, yeah, we need to format the numbers in a way that the financial people like to see them, and that really does take some care and does take some effort. But the best way to figure that out is to just try it for yourself. So I just try to sum up the things things that are easy to do and that you can easily check out yourself and play with. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do. You might have a little bit of an easier time doing it if you're a TypeScript programmer, because the WASM AP binding is really TypeScript more than JavaScript. But I do JavaScript, so I have to do some jump through some hoops. Okay, just as we can import files into DuckDB, we can also export files. And this is, so it sounds a bit weird, right? Because we have a database query result, it's inside the database process. Why would you want to get a file out of it? What does it even mean to get a file out of that? Well, it means simply that the result set is being represented as a bag of bytes, as a buffer, really. So it's a file inside the DuckDB WASM universe. And what it gives you is that it allows you to very easily download that to a web blob. And then, of course, you can send that to the user and then send the download header with it, so that it becomes a file on the user end when they download it. But before you can do that, you have to really run a SQL statement. Copy statement is something that DuckDB does. Copy statement takes a result set, which could just be an SQL statement, a select statement. And you say, okay, what's the destination? To some file name. And based upon just heuristics, like if you say write it to something.json, it will default to writing a JSON file. If if you say write it to .parquet, it will write a parquet file. So this makes Huey and DuckDB also a very convenient tool for converting file formats. Huey supports all these formats, so you can just download them all, and it all uses this exact type of syntax. So we just say copy, take the connection, we run the query, run the copy statement. This time we don't get a result set because it's just being dumped into a file. And we use a temp file inside DuckDB to do that, so that we don't, we try not to mess up the files that are already loaded. And then we just say copy file to buffer, and we get the buffer, and the buffer we just make a new blob, make a URL, and present a link in the document, and it starts downloading. That's how it works. Okay, this is my last slide. So takeaways. Huey project is on github.com, rpbouwman/Huey. On the site, the README is a link to the online demo. So it's just using GitHub pages to just publish the source, and it immediately works. So there's no web server or whatever. It's just static web page. Link is directly on the README of the Huey project. If you have any issues or bugs, just use the issues on the Huey project. And if you just want to check out, if you're not interested in DuckDB, WASM, or in Huey itself, DuckDB itself is duckdb.org. And there's from there you will find everything: documentation, downloads, installation, different program APIs, and lots more. So that's it. Thank you. Is there any other questions or something that you want to? Yes?
Do you have some kind of extension feature, like let's say I want to do a geolocation lookup? Oh, thanks a lot. So do you have some kind of extension feature, like if I want to do a geo IP lookup on IPs in a log file or something like that?
Yeah. So should I repeat the question again, because it was now? The geo lookup, Huey does not support that. Right now, Huey also does not have a plugin system. DuckDB has special extensions. There's a couple. There's an official one, and there's also a set of community. There might be something in there for you. And as far as Huey goes, yeah, Huey is really going to be all about, mostly about typical OLAP, typical analysis features. There's still a bunch of things that I want to do. Spatial has not come up yet, but the whole idea of doing a plugin system has come up because there's things like we want to do with formatting and calculations and that kind of thing. So we might, but to answer your question shortly, no, it's not there. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you, that was interesting. And my question is, or I have two questions. The first question is, you showed us that it is possible to stack two files, right, with a taxi.
Yes.
But is it also possible to merge two data files or merge two tables which don't have the same columns but have one shared column and then combine them by that column?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So if I understand correctly, what I do when I load these taxi files, all these taxi files is the same layout, right? And Huey detects that, and then it just lumps them together. And technically, how that works, how that's implemented, is I just say I have a collection. In DuckDB you say, okay, read parquet file. And now I say, and the argument for the file can be a file name, but it can also be an array of file names. And that's what I use there. But what you're saying is also possible because DuckDB has a feature, at least for the CSV reader. I have to check for the parquet reader, where you can do, you can say just a flag which says union by name. And that will actually take the similarly named columns, and it just ignores all the other columns and only presents the ones that are similar across files. So that's technically that is a feature that's already there. I briefly showed that in DuckDB, in Huey, there's this data source dialog. Let me just pop it up again. Wait. That's this one. So, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, but why is that? Yeah, this is something probably, wait, that's probably because my presentation is... Okay, I'm sorry, thank you for that. So the idea is that so far the focus has really been on just making the pivot table work and making the query access work and so on. And recently I just added that data source settings dialog. And the idea is that we're going to be able to control properties about the data source and also create, like right now, the process is really take a file, load the file, and that's your data source. But as we already saw, we can also load a database, DuckDB database, and that works a little bit differently. The feature you're asking for is something that will be there because how it's going to work is you're going to be able to just add an empty data source and basically dress it up with features that are already there. So you can just pick the files that you already have and then control those things as well. A simple incarnation of it will be that we have like an SQL top in this dialog. This SQL can write a DuckDB select statement that actually represents the data source. And there you could already do what you're asking for, but you would need to, write the SQL statement for it. Fortunately, DuckDB makes it very easy because they have the union syntax has a by name modifier, so that you can actually say write a union by name rather than the typical positional union that you have in standard SQL. So the feature you're asking for is really quite close. It's not there yet, but it's not that hard to build that. So yeah, good question. Thank you. Yes.
Can you see the SQL query that you run against the database? Yes,
you can. I already said that you have the ability to export. There's a whole interesting thing actually. Let me just get that. So this is a very simple query, right? Let's make it a little bit more interesting. So to export it, we can say okay, give us SQL, and then we can get the clipboard. But the thing is, let's take it as a pivot. So let's just export it. Now if we look at this query, we get the DuckDB pivot statement for that. And the thing is, this is not the queries that I run. And the reason is that this is a query, this is meant to be like, okay, you made your report and now you want to recreate that on your own environment, in your own, I don't know, maybe you're not even in DuckDB environment, maybe you're in Databricks or whatever. So you have this query to run that there. I don't use these queries, and the reason is that Huey wants to only execute the stuff that you see on the screen. So it would not be possible to actually do that whole statement there. But if you want to see what Huey does, every statement appears in the query log. So if you go in the browser, you see that this is what's being executed there. So yes and yes. Okay. Okay. I think one more question. No? Okay. In that case, I will. Does anybody mind if I take your picture? Just a picture for me for a souvenir. Is that okay? Okay. If you do object and you don't want to say, and you can find me later, and I will erase it. Thank you so much. You've been wonderful.